The People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, presents Nation Watch.
Good evening and welcome to this Nation Watch special. My name is Mervyn Williams, your host. Nation Watch is a production of the People's National Congress Reform. And this evening we're going to be talking about the local government election 2023. In my considered opinion, it's being mismanaged. Here to share his views from a technical perspective is Mr. Vincent Alexander, Commissioner at the Guyana Elections Commission. Welcome, sir. Viewers, just to let you know that earlier today, the People's National Congress Reform met with the Guyana Elections Commission and discussed a range of issues. And I must tell you that I am not impressed with the operations at GCOM. Mr. Alexander, let's talk a little bit before we get into greater details about the status at the Commission with respect to addressing the bloated voters list and the situation with the introduction of biometrics. I know that a long time ago, the purchase of equipment to support biometrics was in fact approved. What is the situation? Where are we? Are we going to get the biometrics anytime soon?
All right, Marvin, let's start with what you referred to as the bloated list. Lots of people have zoomed in on the word bloated. I think we need to be clear in our minds, what is it we're really talking about? We're talking about the list of electors in a country of approximately 750,000 people. The electoral list of approximately 661,000 persons. And we know that our school population is somewhere in the vicinity of 200,000, which means that under no circumstance our list should be more than 500 and odd thousand rather than the 600 and something thousand we have. So we are seeing a list that represents over 100 and something thousand plus persons who are obviously not resident. And the word residency has issues, who are obviously not in Guyana, who don't live in Guyana and who aren't here to participate. Separate and apart from this conjecture, about 750, 661, 200,000 school children, we ought always to remember that the only way people are taken off of our list is use a death certificate for those persons. That's the only way. Now, and that only way is peculiar to what has come out of the CJ's ruling, because prior to the CJ's ruling, the Chief Justice's ruling, we would have periodic house-to-house registration, which would allow for us to get a new register of registrants based on a house-to-house registration exercise. That has been the trend since 1992. We last had such an exercise in 2008 with an understanding we do it every 7 years. So we were due for one no later than 2015. It was not done in 2015. But in 2018, the Parliament passed the 2019 budget and made a provision for house-to-house registration. There was no objection to this in Parliament, and the request for that appropriation came out of GCOM, which meant there was also no objection to it in GCOM. Why do I make that point? I make that point to say that all of the stakeholders in Guyana were on one sheet on the question of how we treat with our National Register of Registrants and our voters list up to 2018 when the budget for 2019 was passed.
Yeah.
It was only after a no confidence motion there were those who changed their position and are now contesting all sorts of issues that they themselves never contested prior to the no confidence motion. So the point we want to make is no matter how high or how low others jump, they were doing no jumps and were themselves a party to an exercise that would have led to a new list being created in 2019.
Having advocated for it themselves since 2015.
Since 2015. And the monies were allocated. They were in, they not oppose the allocation of the money in GCOM nor outside of GCOM. Now, so let me get back to this question of why it is so necessary to have that exercise. The numbers suggest it's necessary. But more than the numbers suggesting that it's necessary, we know that since there's no mechanism to take people off the list unless they die, and that further to that, we have no mechanism to take the overseas Guyanese who die off of the list, that thousands of overseas Guyanese are retained on the voters list. Thousands. And nobody can challenge that. Nandalal himself has come around to accepting that yes, there are overseas Guyanese on the voters list
Who
have died.
possibly died, yes.
Who have died.
Have-
Not possibly
who have
died.
yes.
One can look at that announcement and see every night how many of them are dying. And it means that between 2008 to present, which is a period of how many years? 2008 to now, you're talking about 14 years. 14 years. All of the overseas Guyanese who have died overseas are likely still to be on that list, and that has to be thousands. In a country where the difference between the main contesting parties, the elections, is somewhere in the vicinity of 7,000 votes. That's the difference. And you have large numbers of overseas Guyanese who have died and who are resident on the list. Now, again, one may say, well, so what? And when you say so what, you have some guys around town who say, well, you know, our system for voting is so perfect that nobody can penetrate the system and cast a fraudulent vote. There are those who are frequently repeating that.
And possibly believing it too.
Well, I don't know if they believe it, because some of them themselves are up to wickedness, so they don't have to believe it, but they repeat it.
Well, a lie repeated
Convenient.
often enough convinces the liar.
Yes.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is this, that in the recount, the APNU AFC identified scores, hundreds, probably thousands of persons whose names were struck off by the presiding officers as having voted. APNU identified that many of those persons were in fact either dead or out of the country. But you can't take the APNU word for it. You know, you can't take the politician's word for it. You have to go beyond that. And so what the APNU did was to submit these names to GCOM in protest. And what GCOM did, under the signature of Justice Khalid Singh, these names were sent to the Chief Immigration Officer and to the Registrar of Births and Deaths. The Chief Immigration Officer responded, and if I and two names, and 199 were verified as persons who were not in the country at the time, but whose names were ticked off as having voted. Another list had, I think, 200 something, and again, about 70% were verified as being out of the country. So that let's go past all of this hullabaloo about good mechanisms and all of that. And let's clearly understand that no matter how good the system is, we now have irrefutable evidence that there were persons who were not in the country who voted. And therefore, it means that there has been mechanisms to penetrate the good system, whatever those mechanisms are. Unfortunately, we have not been able to find what those mechanisms are because GCOM has refused to conduct a review of its systems. A review of GCOM systems may well lend to an answer as to how this could occur. But GCOM has refused. When I say GCOM, I don't take collective responsibility because I have not refused. It is the three commissioners who represent the government and the chairperson who has refused to carry out this review. A review which merely sought to find out what are the fault lines, the flaws, the gaps in our system. They came back with this argument that no, you can't do that because under the Constitution, any matter about elections, results, and things like that are to go to petition. But the fact of the matter is that these are not issues that are petition bound because we're not asking to find out who did what wrong. That's what the petition is for. We're not asking for a audit that would change the results. That's what the petition is for. We are simply asking for a normal activity in any project. That
Review.
is, at the end of the project, you review to see how well you have done. And if you have not done well, why not? And GCOM has refused to do that on the grounds that no politicians must look at any electoral-related matter. Now, I want to make an interesting point here. If that is true, what do you have to say about the CY, the Commission of Inquiry?
Certainly not a court.
I will say this about it. The Commission of Inquiry is seeking to determine what happened in a very small window. A very small window. And the argument is that the president has the authority to set up a commission of inquiry under the Commission of Inquiries Act. And my response is twofold. One, what the Commission of Inquiry is doing is far beyond a review because the Commission of Inquiry is trying, in a sense, to determine what went wrong, how it went wrong, and who made it go wrong. That's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to do what has been argued should be done in a court. So those who are arguing it should be done in a court should well make the same argument. And my second point is this, that if that's what the Commission of Inquiry is doing, notwithstanding the general provision for a Commission of Inquiry to do that, the Constitution speaks specifically to how disputes at elections are dealt with. And the Commission of Inquiry Act is an enabling piece of legislation. It is therefore subordinated to the Constitution. And so although the president may have authority to establish a commission of inquiry, when one looks at the hierarchy of our law, and the fact that one law says matters of this nature are only supposed to be dealt with at the level of a petition and in court, then that does not, in my view, my layman view, necessarily give the president the right to establish a commission of inquiry to deal with the matter,
That could have
which the
been dealt with
Constitution says,
yeah,
according to all of these other people,
Yeah.
should be dealt with
by a court
by
of
the
law.
court. So we see there's a lot here that raises red flags about what the government in three instances. One, taking people to court for electoral offenses and being unable to properly prosecute those cases after a year has passed, and claiming that the court is slow when in fact a number of those cases have been held up because they have intervened, asking for these matters to be tried uh, at the level of the High Court rather than the Magistrate Court, and taking that into a judicial process that has held up the actual trial. But they then turn around and say the court is slow. So, on one hand, you have this issue of the cases that are not going anywhere. On the other hand, you have the petition, which they've objected to from a procedural perspective. So, something was filed 2 days after the date. And at the level of the CCJ,
Allegedly.
at the level of the CCJ, there was a split decision, and a lot of people don't realize this.
Yeah.
The CCJ was not unanimous. Two judges, the CCJ, argued that this petition should be heard
At the level of the full
at
court.
the level of the full court. They argued that.
I want to come to something that touches on the integrity of GCOM. Pardon me if I sound too harsh. Last Tuesday, the People's National Congress Reform held a press conference. During the course of that press conference, the point was made that the list of electors specific to local government elections had not yet been released, had not yet been made available, had not yet been published.
And they were correct.
The people on the picket line in front of GCOM on the same day kept making the same point. GCOM issued a statement soon after, or just about the time of the PNCR's press conference, in which Yolanda Ward said that.
And Ms. GCOM said,
No,
she's just a face.
Yeah, well, her name was listed below there
She's
on
just
the
a face.
statement.
She's a PRO.
Very well. GCOM said that people must desist from spreading misinformation and disinformation, and that the list, in fact, was out there since November 4th. Today, at the meeting with GCOM, the PPP today.
I want to make 2 points in relation to what you said. GCOM has been media shy for over a year. Media shy. GCOM has suddenly come alive in terms of press releases since one Commissioner Rui joined the commission, and pointedly says in those meetings, we need to put out a release. So it seems like he's running that aspect of GCOM, the PR aspect. So the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is directly related to what you said. GCOM has not, prior to over the last weekend, put into the public domain any form of list that is specifically related to local government areas and their constituencies. It's only over the weekend that they gazetted an order indicating that they are now going to issue a list.
They're now going to extract
And to post a list, which is based on local government areas and the constituencies. And let's break that down. We are going to an election. We are going to elections, not an election.
Yes, 80 of them.
80 elections in the neighborhood democratic councils and in the municipalities and towns. 8 elections. So that really we have to have 80 lists, each list specific to a neighborhood democratic council and to a municipality. 80. And so in these lists,
And 611 constituencies, I gather,
in those
within those 80.
within those
yes.
80 bodies. And the reason why we have to have those lists, because local government election requires that for someone to vote in those elections and or for someone to be nominated to be a councillor, a candidate to those elections, the person has to be residing within the constituency within the local government area. Has to be configured around the local government area and the constituencies. And the fact of the matter is that prior to this last weekend, there was no such list. However, GCOM carried out an exercise called Claims and Objections, which is intended to ensure only eligible persons are on the list.
No.
Now, if
This-
you do in
this is-
local government,
This is a point I'm coming to, because look, we are what? 13 days away from nomination. The list was reportedly supplied today. Lists have got to be disseminated all across the country to 611 constituencies. That's an increased number of constituencies from
over
2018.
590 something.
Right. Now, if these dates that GCOM has set are anything to go by, it means that, first of all, you have to have your lists going out. You're talking 3 to 4 days getting them out there. And you also have to have claims and objections specific to constituencies, because someone may offer themselves as a candidate in constituency A of local authority 1. The boundary may have been shifted, and that person may now be in constituency 3. Someone will have to have an opportunity to object to that person contesting in a constituency where he or she does not reside. That timeline does not offer that opportunity. How do you treat with that? And then when you're done with that, we'll deal with boundaries.
The issue is not the timeline there at all. Let's go to basics. Claims and objections are intended to ensure that only persons who are eligible are on an electoral list. We are dealing with 80 elections. Therefore, claims and objections should really be conducted in relation to 80 electoral lists. Claims and objections were done, not done on the basis of 80 electoral lists. It was done on the basis of the national lists
10
and
districts.
the divisions therein.
Yeah.
The divisions therein, 10 divisions, 10 districts. So that one was not given the opportunity to do claims and objections specific to a local authority area and its constituencies. So that what would have occurred is that many persons in a country where there's all of this movement based on the housing schemes that have been created, those persons having moved out of a particular local government area would not have necessarily made a claim to be registered where they reside. So we have a lot of people who live in areas where they're not registered, and they're not entitled to vote in those areas. They're entitled to vote, but administratively can't vote because they did not do the claim, because the way claims and objections was administered did not say to them that, you have to. It's necessary, it's compulsory if you're going to vote in your area. The people are of the impression that they can go back where they used to live and cast their vote, which they really shouldn't be able to do. And such people, not having made a claim to be moved, should be objected to. But if you don't conduct a claims and objections in relation to a local authority area, then no one objects to them because it sounds like a normal national elections. Once they're in the country and then they list, they're legit. But you're not legit for local government if you're not living in the local government area. So from the very inception, GCOM went wrong because it did not specifically say to the population, we're doing claims and objections, and that unlike national elections, residency is an element that can be used for an objection because the local government law specifies that for anyone to vote, he or she must be residing in, and they
And
have
registered in.
and registered. What residing in means, including where you eat,
Where you sleep.
where you sleep, and things like that. So it's a very serious provision. But people were not given the opportunity to operate under that provision because our claims and objections were done based on the normal divisions of Guyana. And once you were in Guyana, then there was no basis for an objection to be raised because it was conducted as if it was for a national election rather than a local government election.
Consequent upon which persons have been incorrectly enfranchised and some disenfranchised
Correct.
by the process.
And so it brings us to the second aspect of what you said. At the baseline, things have gone wrong. Now, things haven't gone wrong at the baseline. You have some other issues. If you are going to be creating constituencies at a time when you have already finalized your list, or at a time when it's a small number of days between finalizing the list, then the voters, the candidates, the parties are in no position to do the work required to identify their candidates, even to create symbols in relation to a particular area.
Or to find persons to
And
nominate.
to find persons to nominate because the time given for this is very short and people can be making mistakes because you can go to the list that they previously had, the preliminary list, so to speak, pull in names from that list to find out that those people are not really eligible because although their names may be on the list, they are not residing in those areas. And so there could be a lot of confusion about who are nominated and who are not nominated. There could be a lot of confusion about which constituency someone is identified with because it's only now these constituencies are being rolled out, and that's an issue by itself.
Yes.
And since they're only now being rolled out, somebody who lives in one area where they've changed the boundaries, maybe, but now, for all intents and purposes, has found himself physically somewhere else.
Right. Viewers, you're tuned to Nation Watch Special Edition, and we're discussing the mismanagement of local government elections 2023. My guest is Mr. Vincent Alexander, Commissioner at GCOM. We're almost down the halfway mark on the clock. Boundaries. The minister responsible for local government has arrogated to himself some authority that, in my view and in the view of many others, the law does not afford him. As we understand it, the law allows the minister responsible to demarcate local authority areas. And that is to say, the external boundaries of a local authority area. The minister is empowered to identify the number of seats required in this particular local authority area. Our understanding here is that the minister will communicate to GCOM these boundaries and the number of seats required. GCOM will then proceed to do the groundwork to establish how many constituencies are required and where the boundaries of those constituencies will fall based on population and geography and so on. But we have a position today where the subject minister has decided to eliminate constituencies in some cases, to add constituencies in others, and to appear as though in the case, for example, of the Yarrowcabra area, reduce the number of constituencies in one local authority area and increase the number of constituencies in the neighboring local authority area without indicating whether it is a boundary shift of the LAAs or what it is.
It is a boundary shift of the LA.
But the point here is that the minister clearly overstepped his lawful authority, and he appears, having done so, to put GCOM in a straitjacket situation. Because here's the minister saying how many constituencies and stopping halfway, suggesting where the boundaries are. But GCOM is in a fix where it cannot issue a list based on constituencies because one gathers that GCOM doesn't even know where these boundaries are. They're not out there. And the fact that they're not out there means that a lot of discomfort is being created. A lot of situations are being created where persons will be affected adversely by this thing that is happening here. What is the position of GCOM, the commission, with respect to the minister's involvement and overstepping his lawful mandate?
Let me start off with the minister and his idiosyncrasies. Minister of local government in this country at present time has developed some idiosyncrasies of suggesting and exercising authority that he does not have. And it's not only on a question of elections. He has recently said the government will not allow municipalities to raise rates and taxes, to take them up.
That's madness.
He said that.
Absolute madness.
But if you check the, I think it's the 2013 Amendment Act in relation to municipalities, clearly it says section 157 delete, and section 157 is the section that previously gave the minister the right of fiat over the estimates of a municipality. Those estimates are partly made up by the rates and taxes for revenue purposes. And if you go to the provisions of the Municipal and District Councils Act in relation to rates and taxes, it clearly says that that's an authority of the municipality. The minister may have had scope to change that because he had to prove the estimates. So when they didn't go to, they wouldn't have to go to him with the rates. They go with the estimates, and then he says, no, I'm not approving these estimates. But the law has now clearly said that the provision under which he had authority, the minister had authority to approve estimates has been deleted. But he's telling this whole nation that he's not going to allow these bodies to raise their rates and taxes. Of course, the central government has authority in relation to valuation of buildings, and the municipality cannot itself change the valuation, but it can change the rate at which taxes a building based on the
Purpose and
known
use.
valuation, which they cannot change. So it's a idiosyncrasy because here we come to elections now. And in relation to elections, again, the amendment of the Local Government Elections Act, the amendment of that act, and if I'm not mistaken, it's section, I'm not remembering the section right now, but it's the fifth, the fifth subsection that specifies that the Elections Commission is responsible for combining and subdividing areas for the purposes of constituencies. Clearly says that. But on the 15th of November, we have a gazetted order where the minister has sought to create, divide, and lump constituencies together, clearly in defiance of what the law provides for in relation to constituencies. And so that is, in the first instance, a breach of the law. But in the second instance, it creates problems, even if it were the law, because he's doing this at the time when GCOM is extracting a list that should be extracted based on known constituencies and known local government areas. And so while GCOM is seeking to do that, he's changing these things. And so GCOM is in a predicament, unless there was some movement behind the scenes between him and GCOM. Lists, because their lists have to be consistent with the existing constituencies and local government areas. And if he's changing those things at the time when GCOM is preparing the list, then there is incongruence, right? The two things are at odds. And so we're likely to have problems in terms of what those lists reflect. And what those lists reflect goes back to some of the earlier things we were talking about. Who lives where? Who can vote where? Who can be nominated where? Who can form a party where? Because boundaries have to be known for all of those things to occur. So there's a primary issue of him not having the authority. And there's the second issue that even if he had the authority, the manner in which he's exercising it is causing confusion in the preparation by GCOM of the elections. This matter came up at GCOM last week. When it came to GCOM last week, the three members of the commission representing but not representing, nominated by the government, said that they had done research. They collectively had done research. And based on that research, the minister has the authority. And we said, but share with us your documentation. They said, but no, we have to consult before we could share. And that consultation hasn't ended, so they haven't shared it.
But you have two lawyers across there.
Yeah, two lawyers, but they made reference to 38A, 38A of the Local Government Elections Amendment Act, 38A. And if you read 38A 5, 38A 5, it clearly says that that's the responsibility of GCOM. It clearly says that. So last week they made this contention, didn't share the document, and the matter came up again today. And the CEO had no choice but to say today, as far as he knows, this is a matter that falls within the jurisdiction of GCOM, the CEO, said that today. We asked that the matter be discussed and finalized. Prepared with personal reasons, it's not really a GCOM paper and all of that. He said that you've prepared it, which means you have a position, so you should be ready to discuss it.
And they've spoken to it and about
Right.
it as well.
Now they've asked for time to discuss this matter. And after some persistence, it was agreed that we should do this as quickly as possible. Because I made the point, this is a live matter. You can't put this off for next week or week after next. It's live. These things are being done wrongly and causing confusion for GCOM and disenfranchising people and things like that. It needs to be discussed immediately. So eventually the chairperson agreed that we will do a round robin tomorrow to determine how soon we can sit to resolve this matter, which is a source of tremendous confusion, and which is a source that can completely throw off the deadlines that they're dealing with. Because GCOM has issued a list that purportedly reflects the extant constituencies. And if those constituencies were not lawfully drawn up, then it has to be redone. And who knows what will come of that.
And when.
And when. And therefore, what would be the standing of GCOM's list that is now in the public domain?
Well, mismanagement and unlawful acts seem to be the hallmarks of GCOM as we approach.
Well, I wouldn't say the hallmarks of GCOM because some of these things that we're referring to are not committed by GCOM. Where GCOM is in a problem is that GCOM does not have what it takes to confront wrongdoing and to correct wrongdoing.
Now, we are clearly in a bad place as it relates to local government elections, given the timeline that has been set. I hold very little hope that judging from past trends, that the deliberations with respect to the unlawful acts of the minister will come to anything of significance at GCOM, having regard to the rulings that we have been seeing within recent times. But let's put that aside for a second. Time is running. Viewers, you're tuned to Nation Watch Special, and we are discussing the mismanagement of local government elections 2023. I'm chatting here with Mr. Vincent Alexander, Commissioner at GCOM. Now, there has been absolutely no work done in the area of voter education. We are less than 2 weeks away from nomination day according to GCOM's timeline. Not a single, no ads, no releases regarding voter education. There have been changes. Local authority areas have been readjusted. Boundaries have been changed, lawfully or unlawfully. Some local authority areas have been merged. And we have all these changes, but we do not have any voter education programs being run. How important is voter education to the process of local government elections, which evidently are more complicated than regional and general elections?
Added to what you said, you have new voters. You have persons who have now become of age, voting for the first time, and have not been exposed to the system in any form whatsoever. So voter education is critical, starting with the new voters who are entering the arena for the first time, as well as the ongoing voters because there are changes to the things that they know in terms of constituencies. And for example, you take the elderly people in quarantine who have been in 5274 for all their life. And now 5274 has been divided into two local government areas. Who is telling them that this has occurred? That requires voter education. Take the same case you just mentioned. Haruni Lamaha,
Yarakabra.
Yarakabra Lamaha, Yarakabra
Yarakaba
Haruni.
Haruni.
He was going back to 2016. Yarakabra Haruni and Yarakabra Lamaha did not
Did not
exist
exist in
so
2016.
he's not going back anywhere there. He's
No.
doing his own thing.
Yes.
He's doing his own thing.
Those were brought in
They were brought in
2018.
2018. So again, he's barefacedly telling the nation an untruth that the basis of what he's doing is to correct some devious act of the APNU. There are new, for example, in the Pomeroon as well,
With the
where
merger.
changes have been made
Yes.
with Providence and those places.
Yes.
Those are new local authorities 2018. Those are not any things that were
No.
there in 2016 that the APNU changed in 2018. All of those people need to know what is happening if they're to have a meaningful involvement in local government elections. But at the level of GCOM, there is no voter education manager.
What?
None. And this vacancy has been out there for some time now, and GCOM has been patently slothful and may have been intentionally slothful in not appointing a voter education manager among other offices such as the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, the Logistics Manager, the Chief Accountant, and the voter education person.
What are they playing? They're
So
playing
that
a game to
GCOM
give
does
people
not
experience?
GCOM does not have all of the manpower at the senior level required for the proper conduct of its affairs, and in this instance, of local government elections. And we're seeing that the consequences of that. We saw, for example, where when we were doing claims and objections, there were big banners on the offices across the country indicating that claims and objections will come to an end on the, I think it was the 22nd or some date like that. But the point was this: objections normally follow on claims
Mhm.
because you can object to a claim.
Right.
So you can't have the same closing date for claims and objections. You have to have one closing date for claims and a subsequent closing date for objections. But we advertise throughout this country on the banners one date. And when the APNU raised the matter, GCOM had to go back and extend the date for objections.
And presented it as they were doing a favor to the APNU.
Then again, recently, in the question of the symbols, we gazetted the 21st as the closing date for symbols, and then advertised in the papers the 22nd. And so again, people had to be accommodated beyond the 21st. But that's not the issue. The issue is that some issues of efficiency and competency are manifesting themselves in the way in which the work of GCOM is being done, and the fact that things that ought to be done a particular way are not being done the way in which they're supposed to be done. And I may proffer that the fact that we did not do claims and objections in relation to the constituencies and LGA areas, local government areas, may well be a reflection of people understanding their job, understanding the laws, and applying the laws. And so it's a question of competency, if not deviousness, which would have brought us there.
It is a fact. It is evident that we are in a bad place with respect to local government elections 2023. let's look at another very critical area. GCOM is required to hire staff for the conduct of elections, and the staff that they're required to hire are supposed to be persons who are not known to be affiliated to any political party, particularly those contesting the elections. It is clear that GCOM has a problem on its hands. It is clear that a large number of persons employed by GCOM are in fact not just supporters, but activists attached to the People's Progressive Party. Is GCOM prepared to deal with this? And if GCOM is prepared to deal with this, do they have mechanisms in place to train new recruits after they would have sent home these political affiliates and activists in time for the conduct of local government elections 2023?
Extremely interesting question. I'll take it from the other end. The People's Progressive Party submitted objections to 72 persons who were appointed at various levels to manage elections. 72 persons. The chief elections officer responded. And he says a number of things. He said, I picked the best I have based on the training and the tests that they did. That's one. He said, I picked the people available in the local areas. And in some instances, I had to take people from adjacent local areas because there were none available in a particular local area. So that's two. And he says, and I picked the GCOM staff, particularly in the instances where local areas didn't have people. He says, so are you telling me I have a problem with my GCOM staff who I picked and you are now objecting to them? What should I do with those GCOM staff? If you're objecting to them for local government elections, then you're probably objecting to them, period. What will I do in terms of the quality of staff if I have picked my best, and even I would admit that some of the best are not good enough? You are now asking me to remove them. Where am I getting the replacement from in the first instance? Because I've said to you, I have shortages. I've moved people from one area to another because of shortages. I've used my staff because of shortages. If you move these people, what happens? And not only that, I have to have them in place by a certain time. That time is elapsing. What can I do if you want me to remove 72 persons, to make sure I get a replacement to those 72 persons to keep to my timelines? So that was his response. And lo and behold, they withdrew the 72 objections. But they haven't withdrawn those elections.
The names, the
Having
objections.
withdrawn those persons whom they objected to, the APNU has now surfaced some names. And GCOM has undertaken to do a due diligence to determine the veracity of the APNU's claim. So the judge is not yet in on those persons, but the timelines have already gone in terms of when those persons should have been appointed.
It appears that it is necessary, if ever there was doubt, all doubt has evidently been removed. It is necessary for these dates that have been put out there for nomination right down to election day. Those dates will have to be reviewed if elections which are to be credible will be held in 2023 with respect to the local government areas.
That's a very modest and conservative position. Myself and Commissioner Chapman have taken the position that given the fact that the list has not been attended to in terms of ensuring that you don't have people who are not eligible removed from the list. The fact that you've not reviewed your systems to ensure that you close all the gaps and flaws in the system. The fact that you have refused to discuss the matter of biometrics so that the two issues I referred to earlier and the one of the list in particular could be ameliorated, that those things have not been attended to, irrespective of all of these other issues we have raised tonight, has put us in the position where we feel that we cannot support the
The
holding
holding of
of
local
local
government
government
elections.
elections at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander. Ladies and gentlemen, the commissioners nominated by the opposition hold the view collectively that given the circumstances faced by the Guyana Elections Commission, whether by its own acts or omissions, whether resulting from the unlawful actions of the subject minister, they hold a collective position that is that they cannot support the holding of local government elections 2023. I share those views. I have been asking the questions and I have been carrying a moderate line. But the reality is the conditions are not right for the holding of local government elections. The procedures continue to be mismanaged. And I support the view that we are not ready and therefore should not support the holding of local government elections 2023. Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander, for joining me on this special edition of Nation Watch. Ladies and gentlemen, I trust that you are better informed on the question of local and the manner in which it is being mismanaged. Thank you. Until we meet again. God bless.